The photograph sits in a wooden box, hidden beneath layers of dust and forgotten memories. It's 1973, and a woman named Mac McCormick holds what might be the only true image of a man who changed music forever. But here's what haunts him. For 35 years, nobody knew this picture existed. Nobody captured Robert Johnson while he walked the earth. And when you hear why, you'll understand that some absences speak louder than any image ever could. The Delta in the 1930s was a place where cameras were as rare as hope itself. But that's not the whole story, because while other musicians of that era, Son House, Charlie Patton, even lesser-known players, managed to find their way in front of a lens, Robert Johnson remained a shadow. A voice on records that sold in the thousands, a guitarist whose technique baffled everyone who heard him, and yet invisible, completely, impossibly invisible. There's something deeply unsettling about a man who could shake the foundations of American music and leave almost no visual trace, as if he knew that to be captured on film was to be pinned down, defined, made ordinary. And Robert Johnson was never ordinary. Before we walk deeper into this mystery, subscribe to Soul Chronicles and turn on notifications, because every story here lives in the shadows between history and legend, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Leave a comment telling us which blues mystery you want us to uncover, because each tale we tell guards a secret that refuses to stay buried. Picture Mississippi in 1936. The air thick with heat and the weight of Jim Crow laws that made every black person's existence a careful negotiation with danger. Photography wasn't just expensive, it was suspicious. A black man with a camera could be accused of anything. A black man being photographed could be remembered, identified, hunted. In a world where invisibility meant survival, perhaps the question isn't why Robert Johnson wasn't photographed. Perhaps the question is, why would he want to be? But Robert Johnson wasn't hiding from everyone. People saw him. They heard him. At juke joints from Robinsonville to Helena, from Memphis to San Antonio, he materialized like smoke, played until dawn, then vanished before the sun could find him. Witnesses described a slight man, dark-skinned, with hands that moved across guitar strings like water flowing uphill. They remembered his eyes. Some said they were soft, almost sad. Others swore they burned with something that made you look away. Johnny Shines, who traveled with Johnson for months, said something strange. He said Robert would sometimes play facing the wall in a corner, his back to the audience. Not out of shyness, but as if he was playing for someone else entirely, someone the rest of them couldn't see. When asked why Johnson never wanted his picture taken, Shines went quiet. Then he said, Robert had his reasons. And if you knew them, you wouldn't want your picture taken either. What reasons could make a man afraid of cameras? In the folk magic traditions of the Deep South, photographs held dangerous power. To capture someone's image was to capture a piece of their soul. The enslaved people who had been brought to America carried with them beliefs that crossed the Atlantic in the holds of ships. Beliefs about the spirit world, about how the seen and unseen realms touched each other in unexpected ways. A photograph could be used in conjure work, in root magic, to bind someone, to curse them, to call them across distances. If Robert Johnson had made a bargain with forces beyond human understanding, then perhaps a photograph was the last thing he needed existing in the world. The legend says he went to the crossroads, that he met a tall man in black who took his guitar, tuned it in ways that bent the air itself, handed it back, and walked away. After that night, Robert Johnson could play anything, could make a guitar sound like a full band, could sing in voices that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and unreachable. But legends always have a price. And if the price was his soul, then maybe, just maybe, he understood that a photograph was proof, evidence, a way for the darkness to find him when the contract came due. But let's step back from the supernatural for a moment, because there's another truth here, just as haunting. Robert Johnson was a wanderer in a world that wanted black men to stay in one place, where they could be controlled, counted, contained. He had no fixed address, no steady job that would put him in front of a camera for a work permit or identification. He moved through the South like water, finding cracks in stone, playing for nickels and dimes, sleeping in different beds or none at all. The infrastructure of documentation, birth certificates, social security cards, driver's licenses, was something he either avoided or never had access to. To be photographed required being stationary long enough for the world to notice you, and Robert Johnson never stopped moving. There were photographers who captured the blues in those years. Alan Lomax and his father John, traveling through the Delta with recording equipment funded by the Library of Congress, documenting voices that would have been lost forever. But they were looking for the old guard, the original Delta pioneers. By the time they came through, Robert Johnson was already a rumor, a name people mentioned in passing. He'd recorded his 29 songs in hotel rooms in Texas, not in the fields of Mississippi, where the Lomaxes were searching. And by 1938, he was dead. Poisoned at 27, the story goes, by a jealous husband, gone before anyone with a camera thought to seek him out. Son House, who taught Robert Johnson to play, lived until 1988. He sat for countless photographs, was interviewed, filmed, celebrated. But Son House said something that cuts to the bone. He said, "Robert came to me a boy who couldn't play nothing. 6 months later he came back and played like the devil himself. I asked him how. He just smiled and said some things are better left in the dark. In the dark where cameras cannot reach." The first photograph that surfaced came 35 years after his death, a small portrait found by researcher Stephen LeVere, showing a young man in a striped suit, holding a guitar, looking directly into the camera, with eyes that seem to know exactly what's coming. The image is haunting not because of what it shows, but because it was hidden for so long. Why did it take decades for this to surface? Who had it? And why did they keep it secret? The second photograph appeared even later, a photo booth image from the 1930s, more casual, showing Robert with a cigarette and that same unsettling gaze. 2 photographs in total, both discovered long after his voice had already become legend. It's as if the world wanted to keep him as a ghost, as a story, as a mystery that could never be fully solved. And maybe that's the point. What if Robert Johnson understood something that we're only now beginning to remember? That in an age before surveillance, before everyone carried a camera in their pocket, before every moment was documented and tagged and archived, there was power in being unseen, power in being a voice without a face, a sound without a shape. The blues has always been about absence, about what's missing, the lover who's gone, the home you can't return to, the freedom that exists only in the music. Robert Johnson, by remaining unphotographed, became the ultimate expression of that absence. He became the blues itself, something you feel more than see, something that slips through your fingers even as it breaks your heart. Think about how we experience his music now. We listen to those crackly recordings from 1936 and 1937, and we have to imagine him. We have to conjure his presence from sound alone. That act of imagination makes him more real, not less. Because in imagining him, we bring our own ghosts, our own losses, our own crossroads moments. He becomes not one man, but every man who ever picked up a guitar and tried to make sense of suffering. Every person who ever stood at a choice that would define them. Every soul that wondered if greatness required sacrifice. Would we feel the same about Crossroad Blues if we had 100 photographs of Robert Johnson? If we knew exactly what he looked like from every angle, in every mood? Or does the absence of his image allow the music to grow larger, to contain more possibilities, to be the vessel into which we pour our own understanding of what it means to be human? There's a theory whispered among those who study the occult traditions of the South that Robert Johnson knew about photography's power to trap the spirit, that he avoided cameras not out of superstition, but out of genuine understanding. In hoodoo practice, personal concerns, hair, fingernails, clothing, and yes, photographs can be used to conjure on someone from a distance. If you have someone's photograph, you have a link to them that transcends physical space. You can bind them, influence them, call them. If Robert Johnson had indeed made a pact with something beyond human understanding, then every photograph would be a vulnerability, a way in, a crack in the armor. But here's what chills the blood. Some people say it wasn't Robert who avoided cameras. They say cameras avoided him. There are accounts, scattered and hard to verify, of people trying to photograph Robert Johnson and finding that their equipment malfunctioned, film that came out blank, cameras that jammed. One photographer in Memphis supposedly tried 3 times to capture Johnson's image at a house party in 1937, and each time the exposure failed. He said the negatives looked as if they'd been exposed to light before development, even though he'd been careful. He said when he looked at Robert Johnson through the viewfinder, sometimes it seemed like there was nothing there at all, just an empty space where a man should be. Folklore, maybe. The kind of story that grows around a figure who's already legendary, but it speaks to something deeper. The idea that some people exist in a different relationship to reality than the rest of us, that they move through the world under different rules. And if you accept, even for a moment, that Robert Johnson might have touched something beyond the ordinary, then maybe the absence of photographs isn't mysterious at all. Maybe it's exactly what we should expect. His contemporaries, the men who knew him, often spoke about Robert as if he wasn't entirely there, even when he was standing right in front of them. David "Honeyboy" Edwards, who was with Johnson the night he was poisoned, said Robert had a way of looking past you, as if he saw something in the distance that you couldn't perceive. He said, Robert was always leaving, even when he was staying still. You'd be talking to him, and part of him was already gone, already somewhere else. How do you photograph someone who's already somewhere else? The music Robert Johnson left behind is strange even now. Guitarists who study his technique find things that shouldn't be possible. Chord voicings that require hand positions no one else uses. A rhythm style that sounds like at least 2 guitars playing at once. He recorded alone, but his music has the complexity of an ensemble. Some of that can be explained by his innovative use of boogie bass lines, by his mastery of thumb picking, by countless hours of practice. But listen closely to songs like Hellhound on My Trail or Me and the Devil Blues, and there's something else there. Something in the timbre of his voice, the way the guitar seems to breathe. It's as if the recordings captured not just a man and his instrument, but a presence, a third thing in the room that pressed itself onto the wax. Engineers who've analyzed his recordings note anomalies, frequency responses that don't quite match the equipment of the era, overtones that seem to appear from nowhere. Nothing that proves anything supernatural, of course, but enough to make you wonder. Enough to understand why people who heard him play in person would come away shaking their heads, unable to explain what they'd witnessed. Don Law, the producer who recorded Robert Johnson in those hotel rooms in Texas, said something strange before he died. He said the playback of Johnson's recordings never sounded quite the same as the live performance, as if something was lost or filtered out in the transition from air to wax. He said, when Robert played in the room, you felt it in your chest, in your bones. Like the floor was vibrating with something that wasn't just music, but on the records it was just music. Incredible music, but something was missing. I always wondered what we didn't capture, what couldn't be captured. What if that's the same thing that couldn't be captured in a photograph? By 1937, Robert Johnson had recorded all the songs he would ever record. 29 tracks that would define the blues, influence rock and roll, echo through generations of musicians. But he was only just becoming known. The records were selling. Musicians in Chicago and Detroit were hearing them, trying to figure out how he did it. If he'd lived, if he'd continued, he would have inevitably been photographed. Film crews would have wanted him. Magazines would have sought him out. The machinery of documentation would have caught up with him. But he didn't live. August 16th, 1938. A juke joint near Greenwood, Mississippi. Robert Johnson played for a Saturday night crowd. Someone handed him a bottle of whiskey that had been tampered with. Some say strychnine, some say lie. He drank it, kept playing, then collapsed. He died 3 days later in agony, crawling on his hands and knees, barking like a dog, some witnesses said. The poison had done its work. He was 27 years old. No photographer was present. No camera captured his final moments. He died as he lived, unseen, unrecorded, existing only in the memories of those who happened to be there. When you die without photographs, you become what people need you to be. You become symbol, archetype, mirror. Robert Johnson's absence allowed him to transform into something larger than any single human being could be. He became the crossroads itself, the decision point, the moment when talent meets temptation, when the ordinary becomes extraordinary, when the price of greatness comes due. And perhaps that's the answer to why nobody photographed Robert Johnson while he was alive. Not because he actively avoided cameras, though he might have, not because of supernatural intervention, though the story is too strange to dismiss entirely, but because in the grand architecture of legend, in the way some lives become myths that sustain us, his absence was necessary, required, inevitable. Think of all the musicians we have endless photographs of. Every angle, every era, every mood. We know what they looked like when they were young, when they were old, when they were triumphant, when they were broken. And while those images give us information, they also limit our imagination. They define the person in ways that can never be undefined. We see them as they were, not as they could be. But Robert Johnson, he exists in the space between knowing and imagining. When you listen to Crossroads, you picture him in your own way. When you hear Love in Vain, his face is the face you need it to be. He's yours in a way that fully documented lives can never be. The absence of photographs didn't diminish his presence. It amplified it. It made him infinite. There's a reason why the two photographs that eventually surfaced feel like intrusions, like someone broke a sacred pact. When you look at that young man in the striped suit, part of you doesn't want to see him. Part of you wants to preserve the mystery, to keep Robert Johnson as a voice in the darkness, a guitar sound that defies explanation, a story that refuses to be pinned down. Because once you have the photograph, something is lost. The spell is broken, the ghost becomes flesh, and flesh is always smaller than legend. In the traditions of the Delta, there's a concept called the fixed spirit, a soul that remains earthbound, tied to this world by unfinished business or by conjure work that won't let it rest. Some people say Robert Johnson is a fixed spirit, that his music keeps him here, recycled through generations of listeners, played over and over, trapping him in an eternal loop of his own making. If that's true, then maybe the absence of photographs is a mercy. Maybe it's the only part of him that got away, that wasn't captured and reproduced and sold. Maybe in remaining invisible, some essential part of Robert Johnson achieved the freedom that his music so desperately sought. Would you trade your image for your immortality? Would you choose to be remembered as a voice, a feeling, a mystery, rather than as a documented, analyzed, fully known person? It's the bargain Robert Johnson made, whether he intended to or not. And listening to his music now, more than 80 years after his death, you have to admit, he got the better end of the deal. The blues is about absence, about the hole in the heart where love used to be, about the home you can't return to, about the train that's taking everyone away from you. Robert Johnson, by remaining unphotographed, became the ultimate blues, the absence that defines everything around it. You feel him more because you can't see him. His music cuts deeper because there's nothing to distract from the sound, no image to soften the blow, no face to make him familiar, safe, understood. He remains what he was meant to be, a voice crying out from a crossroads, asking questions we still can't answer, making bargains we still don't understand, playing guitar in ways that still baffle us, and existing just beyond the reach of documentation, beyond the reach of anything that would limit him to a single interpretation, beyond the reach of light itself. In the end, maybe nobody photographed Robert Johnson alive because death was always watching, because he moved through the world like a man on borrowed time, playing borrowed notes, living a borrowed life. The cameras stayed away because he was never really there to begin with. He was always already a ghost, already a legend, already the story we would tell when we wanted to understand what it costs to be great, what it means to trade everything for one perfect moment, what remains when the price is paid and the music stops. Two photographs exist, two frozen moments from a life that refused to be frozen. But the truth of Robert Johnson isn't in those images, it's in the absence of all the others, in the hundreds of moments that went uncaptured, in the countless nights when he played in rooms where no camera would ever go, for people who would never tell anyone what they saw, creating music that would outlive every photograph ever taken. Some things are meant to be heard, not seen. Some lives are meant to be felt, not documented. Some souls are meant to remain in the shadows, where the mystery keeps them alive. Robert Johnson understood this. Whether by choice or by circumstance, by design or by accident, he became invisible. And in doing so, he became eternal. The absence of his photograph is his final greatest trick, the ultimate disappearing act. The crossroads where the seen world ends and the legend begins. And here we stand, decades later, still trying to see him, still listening to those crackly recordings, trying to picture the man who made them, still wondering what he looked like, how he moved, what his smile was like, what his eyes held. The absence haunts us, calls to us, makes us lean closer to the speakers as if this time we might finally glimpse him in the spaces between the notes. But we never will, and that's exactly how it should be. Because Robert Johnson didn't make a deal with the devil for fame. He made a deal with eternity, and eternity doesn't need a photograph. It needs only the music, the voice in the dark, the guitar that sounds like a door opening to somewhere we can't follow, the mystery that refuses to be solved. Nobody photographed Robert Johnson alive, and perhaps that's the most powerful photograph of all, the one that never existed, the absence that speaks louder than any image ever could, the space where we place our own understanding of genius, of sacrifice, of what it means to be so extraordinary that the ordinary world can't contain you, can't capture you, can't make you fit inside the frame. He walked between the raindrops. He played in the shadows. He sang for ghosts, and when the cameras came looking for him, there was nothing there to find. Just a guitar leaning against a wall. Just the echo of notes that have already faded. Just the stories people told about the night a stranger came to town and played like heaven was weeping and hell was laughing, and nobody could tell the difference. That's who Robert Johnson was. That's why nobody photographed him. And that's why, even now, when you close your eyes and listen to his music, you can see him more clearly than any photograph could ever show you. If this story sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe to Soul Chronicles, because here we don't just tell stories, we resurrect the souls who refuse to be forgotten, and every one of them has a secret the world tried to bury. Some absences are louder than presence, some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, and some men are meant to be voices in the darkness, singing us toward a truth we're not ready to face. Robert Johnson was all of these things, and he remains all of these things, precisely because we can't see him, can't hold him, can't reduce him to a face in a frame. He's out there still, somewhere between the last note and the next silence, between the question and the answer, between the crossroads and the grave, playing for an audience we can't see, making bargains we don't understand, and laughing at everyone who ever tried to capture him. Because you can't photograph a ghost, and Robert Johnson was always a ghost, even when he was alive, especially when he was alive. And that, more than anything else, is what makes his music immortal.